live happily with your lover.
It's been a week since my beloved wife left this note and vanished. I stand motionless in the room, holding our engagement ring. How did it come to this? My name is James, a 43-year-old office worker. My wife, Sarah, also 43, is a housewife. Though we were never blessed with children, our life together was pure happiness. We traveled a lot together, and on days off from work, we'd go shopping or dine out. Of course, during our long marriage, we had our arguments. But we always made it a point to apologize if we felt we were wrong and reconciled by the end of the day. As to historians, we frequently visited each other's parents' homes and had a great relationship with our in-laws. There seemed to be no issues. I always believed that our calm, happy days with my wife would last forever. However, the end of my blissful marital life with my loving wife came suddenly. When I returned home from work, the lights were off. Usually, since Sarah was home, the lights would be on. But that wasn't all. The front door, which would normally be locked, was unlocked, and there was no smell of a delicious dinner at all. Thinking she might be out, I called her cell phone, but she didn't answer, and she didn't even read my messages. An hour passed, then 2, but Sarah did not return. Something felt very off. That's when I noticed it, sitting down on the couch. There was a piece of paper on the table.
In Sarah's handwriting, it read, "Live happily with your lover." She'd been...
Of course. I had never cheated. She must have misunderstood something. I needed to meet her and talk. Sarah isn't the type to socialize much. It is probably the family home that she would rely on in these situations. I immediately called her mother. Karen, it's James. By any chance, is Sarah with you? Oh, James, you're back. Sarah isn't here, but I know where she is. However, she told me not to tell you. I was at a loss as to why she would say that. What do you mean? She seems to suspect me of cheating, but I haven't done anything of the sort. I think she's misunderstood. I need to meet her and talk. I knew from Karen that she knew where Sarah was, so I begged Karen multiple times to let me see her. But Karen didn't tell me. James, she didn't tell me in detail, but she said she'd thought about this for days. I understand you want to talk, but please, give her some space right now. There was nothing I could say to that. But of course, I couldn't just accept it. Even now. I wonder if my wife thinks I'm meeting with another woman. If only I could see her and clear up the misunderstanding. Nothing progressed and a week has passed. My wife hasn't returned. I took out the engagement ring from the bedroom closet. I was planning to give this ring to my wife today, on our 20th wedding anniversary. Truth is, I didn't have money when we got married. I couldn't afford an engagement ring, and we couldn't even have a wedding. I'm not into flashy things, so I don't need a ring or a wedding. Let's use that money for our daily expenses. That was a thoughtful proposal from my gentle wife, sensing our financial situation. Now that we're comfortable, I can gift it to her. But having a wedding at this age feels embarrassing. Yet, I wanted to properly convey my gratitude for these 20 years to my wife. This engagement ring was for that. During these 20 years, whether we were broke or distressed about not having children, she always stood by me and supported me. This ring, which I had prepared hoping for our continued happiness, ever fit on her finger? I held the engagement ring in my heart, feeling lost in our home. One day, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood a beautiful elderly woman. I didn't recognize her. As I was puzzled, the elegant old lady said, "I've been looking for you." I was more confused. Then she continued, "Nice to meet you. My name is Annie. I came here about your uncle. He mentioned wanting to leave you some assets. My deceased father only had a sister. My mother had no siblings. In other words, I don't have an uncle." I thought that she must have mistaken me for someone else, and I told Annie that I do not have an uncle. I figured she would leave after that, but Annie slowly shook her head. "No, I'm sure it's you. Your mother will understand what I mean. Is your mother's name Catherine? Can I please see her?" Indeed, my mother's name was Catherine. However, I was hesitant to introduce her to a stranger. I thought I'd call my mother, and if she also said she didn't know Annie, then Annie would surely give up. So, I called my mother. After explaining the situation, my mother was silent for a while. Bring her to the house. I was taken aback by my mother's words. "What? Do you know Annie? Besides, you don't have any siblings, right? Just bring her, we'll talk later." Could my mother possibly know something about Amy's story? Still confused, I brought Amy to our family home. My mother was waiting outside.
As soon as she saw Amy, she exclaimed, "Amy?"
To my surprise, Amy also said it's been so long, with tears in her eyes.
The two embraced tightly. After their embrace, my mother invited Amy inside. When I demanded an explanation, it wasn't Amy who started speaking, but my mother.
My father was the CEO of a real estate company. Amy used to be our housemaid. We've been close since I was young. My brother was supposed to take over the company, but one day my father arranged a marriage for me. However, I had a boyfriend at that time, your late father. I found out that I was pregnant with his child around the same time. The proposal came. That child was you. My father told me to abort the child and marry the man he had chosen, but I couldn't bear to abort my child or leave him. So I left home, almost eloping. I didn't tell anyone, not even my brother or Amy, where I was going, thinking I'd never see them again.
I had no idea my mother was the daughter of a CEO. I had never heard about her eloping before.
When Catherine left home, I was devastated. But I believed she'd be happier with the man she loved, so I kept my silence. I'm glad she had a happy marriage with him.
Amy looked very relieved. She must have been worried about my mother all this time.
I'm glad to see you, but why visit after all these years?
Hello. I have some sad news to share with you. Andrea.
Saying that, Amy told my mother that her brother had passed away.
Yes, my brother. He probably had a tough time managing everything after I left. He was the one who took care of our parents in their final years. I'm really grateful to him.
As my mother shed tears, Amy gently handed her a handkerchief. It must have been a shock to be told out of the blue that her brother had passed away. I comforted my crying mother. My uncle, my mother's brother, regretted not being able to help when my mother left home. He didn't have any children, so he wanted to leave some assets for his sister and nephew, so he asked Amy and her daughter, who was also his secretary named Alice, to locate us. My mother and I were truly touched by my uncle's kindness. But it's been many years since my mother left home. It'd only be right for my uncle's assets to be divided among the company and other relatives. That my mother and I declined the inheritance. My mother is now enjoying her retirement years. She doesn't need excessive money. As for me, I want to make my precious wife happy with what I earn. Conveying our feelings, Amy respected our decision.
I think you're still as kind-hearted as ever. And James, you're such a gentle soul. Or your wife must be very lucky.
At Amy's words, my expression stiffened. That wasn't the case. My wife had left me, suddenly feeling downcast. I shared with Amy that my wife had left a week ago, but I truly never cheated on her. I don't even know why she suspected me of infidelity.
As I murmured, Amy gasped, and began dialing a number.
After speaking to her daughter, Alice, Amy handed the phone over to me. Alice's daughter. I've heard the story. The misunderstanding your wife has might be because of me. About a week ago, I called your house. I had finally found out where you were, and I was quite anxious. I probably didn't explain things well to your wife. I told her I needed to talk to James since he's someone important to me. When she asked why, I thought it would be best to speak with you first, so I told her I couldn't explain at the moment. Looking back, she sounded quite upset throughout the call, and she might have mistaken me as someone you were having an affair with. Hearing that everything clicked for me, I immediately called my mother-in-law, Karen. After Amy explained the situation over the phone, the misunderstanding that my wife might have mistaken Alice as the other woman was cleared up. I'll try to get in touch with Sarah right away. True to her word, Karen quickly explained the misunderstanding to Sarah, and she brought her to her parents' home that evening. I'm sorry I jumped to conclusions. So, you weren't cheating on me? I was worried. Why would you suspect me of cheating just because of one phone call? If you had doubts, you could have just asked me.
It wasn't just the call from Alice. I found an engagement ring hidden in the closet. It's not mine, so I thought you might give it to the other woman. I wanted to ask you about it, but you've been so distant lately.
I remembered acting distant. When we first got married, I couldn't afford to buy a ring. So for our 20th anniversary, I had saved up and planned to give her one, but I was quite embarrassed about the whole thing. It was my first time planning such a surprise, and I thought that if I talked to her about it, she might find out. So, I ended up being distant with her, trying to keep it a secret. But I had no idea it hurt her feelings so much.
Also, you love kids. I thought since I can't get pregnant, you might have found someone else. But I thought if that's the case, it can't be helped. So, I left a note and left the house.
It is. I had prepared the ring as a token of my gratitude for all the years together, but little did I know it would lead her to suspect me of cheating. I told her about my regret of not being able to afford a ring or a proper wedding when we first got married, and that I had prepared this ring for our 20th anniversary.
I didn't care at all about not having kids. I'm very happy with just the two of us. During the times we struggled financially, your support was invaluable. I'm really grateful for everything. Let's continue to live happily together.
It's that. I presented her with the small box containing the ring.
I'm so glad I married you. Chicks from now on. I won't keep things to myself and will always discuss with you.
Until those words meant the world to me, I told my wife about my uncle's intention to leave us some inheritance, but she felt just like I did, that it would be best to decline. However, we were touched by my uncle's kindness. Both of us and my mother were delighted that our ties with the relatives were rekindled. My mother had been regretting not being able to visit her parents' graves after falling out with them. First later on, my wife and I, along with my mother, visited the graves of my grandparents and my uncle. I'm set to meet with Amy and Alice after our visit to the gravesite. I had asked them to share stories about my mom's parents and her brother. It seems my mom's parents were a loving couple until the day they passed. I hope that Sarah and I can live just as happily together.